All right, so it's been actually a very intense, but it's a wonderful week. You guys are amazing, and I think we had the one rule that I laid out at the beginning of the week, and I said as long as we respect each other, we can have difference. I think it's been you guys are amazing. There's been some really good conversations, debates, some disagreements with respect, and I think we're all learning together, which is amazing. So thank you, and. The culmination of the week is Haras's talk. So Haras is speaking about pathways to Islamist radicalization and the triple threat, how anti-Semitism is the common denominator. So Haras is a ISGAP Senior Research Fellow, and he's also managing our Follow the Money research project, which is a major project that we're doing. He's a trustee of the UK charity Muslims Against Anti-Semitism. He's an expert and he's been active on issues of counter-extremism and counter-terrorism since 2004. For 7 years, he was the CEO of the as an executive board member of the Quilliam Foundation. It was the world's first counter-Islamist think tank based in London and then later in the United States. And he's been a trustee for the Franco-British Council. Until 2018, Haras was a member of the advisory group on online terrorist propaganda at Europol's European Counterterrorism Center. And before this, he had senior positions in the private sector and large corporations. And Haras has been at every Summer Institute teaching, and we met a few years before that, about 10 years ago, at a conference on anti-Semitism and issues of terrorism in Jerusalem. So. And Haras is really instrumental in this major project that we're doing. So it's really great that he really came here. I made a lot of family obligations. I'm really grateful that you came down. And the floor is yours, and thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Charles. And first of all, apologies to everybody that I haven't been here and won't be here for the 2 weeks, but my daughter's getting married, so thank you. I will be here tonight, but I'll be rushing off early tomorrow morning. Pakistani weddings, there are about 6 functions, and the first one is tomorrow evening. So I'll be rushing back. But I'm around if people want to talk, if I stimulate any sort of questions from what I'm about to talk about. I tell a story every year, and my apologies to people who've heard this before, Charles, Bill, Diane, Yehudit, Catherine.
Get my memory shot.
Right, yeah, so I can tell a totally different story, and yeah. But I want to talk about how I got into this as a Muslim and how I got into the work that I do, both countering extremism, countering terrorism, and also combating, amongst other forms of xenophobia, anti-Semitism as well. My background is that from my mother's side, my family have been in the UK since 1901. My uncles were here in the 20s from my mother's side. My father came here as a social economic migrant in 1953. My mother came in 64, 65 I was born. He hadn't seen her for a while. And I grew up in the UK just like anybody else, because in those days, there was no such thing as faith-based identity politics. Nobody measured us, or anybody, by their faith. Nobody was classified or measured by their faith. If somebody didn't like me, they would call me the P word. Or if they did like me, they still would call me, my ethnicity was Pakistani or originally Indian before the partition. So this phenomenon of measuring somebody or classifying somebody as a Muslim has only just recently started happening recently, and the Islamists, and I will define Islamism for you very, very clearly, using the words of the Islamists, not anybody else's words. It's a recent phenomenon. So I grew up doing what everybody else did at the time, and I was into music. I was a punk rocker when I was 14, 15, then New Romantic, and then reggae and a whole bunch of things. I went to university, son of an immigrant family. They wanted me to read medicine. I did that for a year and didn't want to do it anymore. Did something else much easier, left, and I got into the commercial world, and I've been on the board of some quite large organizations in the UK, and one of them was a European post as well. Something happened to me in 2003 that actually changed my whole earning potential and my life in general and the work that I do. My daughter, my youngest child, who's getting married, she came home one day. By the way, she's the smartest out of all my 3 kids. Oh yeah, camera's been recorded.
Yeah, this is being
Actually, a funny story. My kids always. My eldest is 33 this year, 33, and they have this debate amongst each other, and they say, "Oh, I'm the favourite," or "She's the favourite," or "He's the favourite." I just turn around to them and say, "I don't have any favourites. I don't like any of you, but she is my favourite." And anyway, so she came, and that's for the record. And she came home one day and said she was 7 years old. "Daddy, I don't want to be a Muslim." And I said, "Why? Why didn't you want to be a Muslim? What have we done to you?" She said, "Because Muslims are always angry. They're always killing people. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to kill anybody. I'm only 7 years old." So I said to her, "Where are you getting these messages from?" So smart as a button, she got the remote controlled, flicked onto the TV, BBC, and then other channels. And there, it was just post 9/11. There was the Taliban. They were burning effigies of George Bush and Tony Blair. And they looked very angry. They were firing rifles. And she was getting this messaging that if she wanted to be a Muslim, this is what a Muslim is. And she didn't want to do that. So this started a process of self-reflection and traveling around the world. And I met some of the world's leading teachers and guides. And you've met, wherever you've met Mike, Sheikh Nazim and Sheikh, you've met. Eventually I became a student of two of the world's most eminent Muslim sheikhs, teachers, and studied with them I'm still a student. And I came back to the UK full circle, thinking and realizing that the faith that my mother had brought to the United Kingdom, where there was no dichotomy between being British and Muslim, because being Muslim wasn't an identity. And I'll give you an example of how this identity, faith-based identity politics, is actually misused by groups like Hamas and many other people. And I realized that the majority of Muslims in the world are like my father was, but something is going on. So I left what I was doing, and that's earning potential. I used to have a car driving around with a chauffeur, and I left and I set up an NGO at the time and a media company to pay the bills. And I commissioned at the time the UK's largest survey of Muslim attitudes. University of Salford did it for me. It wasn't cheap, but I felt I had to do it. And there was an answer to one of the questions that really frightened me. It was an open question. By the time it was finished, around about back end of 2004. And the question was, name a Muslim role model. 4.9% of Muslims said, oh, by the way, some people said the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Some people said Muhammad Ali the boxer, parents, whatever. 4.9% said Osama bin Laden. Open question. The demographics and the profile of the people being interviewed, as close as you can get to 50% male, female, are down around the different regions in England. We didn't go to Scotland, England and Wales. And this frightened me. And I went to I had no dealings with the government at that time, but I found my way into a department in the government, the UK government, called Engaging with the Islamic World. Well, that's actually wrong in the first place, because there's no such thing as an Islamic world. And we can talk about that if you like. I gave them my presentation. I said, look, I think we're going to have a 9/11 here in the UK. And they turned around to me and said, don't worry. Our Muslims in the United Kingdom aren't like the Muslims in the US. We talk to our extremists. The likes of Abu Hamza, the likes of Umar Bakri, the likes of Anjem Chowdhury, all of these people. They don't want to do something here, they want to do something over there. Don't worry. Okay, it was a bit patronizing, but I thought, okay, you guys know what you're doing. So I went away. 7/7 happened, and within 24 hours, somebody had remembered my survey, and I found myself briefing Tony Blair at Downing Street. And since then, I've worked with four British Prime Ministers. I've worked with two, my organisation and myself indirectly as such, have worked with two US presidents. We've worked with various governments around the world, DHS, Department of Homeland Security in the US, State Department in the UK and Europe, and I've worked for Europol. Have you guys heard of the CVE strategy? Combating Violent Extremism strategy? You must have. Okay, wow, okay. It was something that was written in the United Kingdom called the PVE strategy as part of the response to the terrorist attacks, preventing violent extremism. And then by 2009, and I was one of the people, I have to be careful of my words because it's been recorded. I was one of the people consulted on it, but in reality I did much more on it. The government didn't listen to everything I had to say or wanted to say, all of my recommendations, so they took some things and didn't take other things. By 2009, we'd realised that there were many things in there that weren't working, and a guy called Quentin Wiktorowicz, who was in the US Embassy here, took it to the US, and we knew ours wasn't working, took it to the US under the Biden, was it Biden by then, 2009? Wasn't it? Obama, not Biden, I meant Obama. Under the Obama administration, took it there, and it's been adopted by the United Nations and everybody else. I'll show you where the holes are in a minute. The main part of the work that I did, Charles alluded to, was an organisation called Quilliam International. I've done many things, but Quilliam Foundation, Quilliam International, when I started, was a four-man operation. And two of the people that set it up, one was a former commander for Osama bin Laden against the Soviets and left Al-Qaeda in that's being recorded and being monitored, in 1999, 2000, bin Laden told all of his commanders in a cave in Kandahar that there are plans to carry out attacks on US assets. That's the way he phrased it. And he stood up and said, I don't want any of this. The Americans saved my life, trained me. I didn't come here to fight the Americans. I came here to set up an Islamic State. I don't want to do anything. And the only reason he got out of the cave alive was all the Libyan Special Forces branch of Al-Qaeda, because he was head of that. Got up with him and he left. And then he went on to set up the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group in Libya, and since then disavowed the ideology and theology and realised the hypocrisy. He'd been radicalised when he was a young kid in the 80s, late 80s, and spent most of his time then doing something about it. The other person, Majid Nawaz, is quite high profile. Spent 5 years in Mubarak's torture chambers because he was sent by a group called Hizb ut-Tahrir in the United Kingdom as a 19-year-old to go and try and instigate a military coup in Egypt so they could take over the armed forces and set up an Islamic State. After 9/11, he was rounded up. He happened to be there, and he was kept for 5 years without actually being found guilty. He was a political prisoner. Amnesty International sort of got him out. He'd read Animal Farm in there. He'd had some traditional classical Islamic training from Al-Azhar University. And he came back. It took him a year, and he disavowed the whole ideology and theology. Cost him his marriage, cost him his eldest son, relationship with his eldest son, because he was no longer a proper Muslim according to this Islamist group. And I was the third person who had never joined an Islamist group, but was very tempted as a youngster. But I had been a punk and an anarchist when I was at university, so I kind of understand. That work I did, and then for 1 year I was interim managing director of ISGAP. Now, as Charles mentioned, I'm working on Follow the Money project, and I'm also working on some other projects in the Middle East and other places. Just yesterday, set up a think tank in the United States called the American Center for Countering Extremism. I signed the documentation last night. I'm a trustee. American Center for Countering Extremism. American Center for Countering Extremism.
And where is it?
Ilhan Omar's district on purpose.
Wait, are you serious, in Minnesota?
Yep. Delaware, County of Delaware. And the person who we've hired as executive director is probably going to get the Republican nomination. Probably won't even go to primaries. And she will be standing against Ilhan. She won't win. But that's not the reason why.
He's the leading lawyer in Minnesota.
Right. That's not what we should talk. That's not the reason why she's standing. There are tactical reasons. In the classic, there are 3 Ds to encountering certain Islamists and terrorists. One of them is disruption. There's other things as well. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm going to come on to my presentation, but I was just making notes, sort of hearing various interaction. And I'm going to just go off piste, as I say, and off script for a minute. Does anybody in the room speak Arabic? Hands up if you speak Arabic. 2? 3? Okay. Good. The first thing is, in the Quran and Hadith, there is no phrase for unbeliever. There's no such word as unbeliever. Kafir is the word, and it comes from its root is kafar, kufr. It means to knowingly cover the truth. So when the Quran talks about kafir, it first of all says nobody should be classified as a kafir, only God, and in the Quran only one person was classified by, we believe as a Muslim, as that it's same as you can't be a Muslim unless you believe in the Torah, the Bible, the Zabur before that, Psalms of David, and other books as well. You can't be a Muslim, a Sunni Muslim. It's in our creed. It's in one of the three eyes. So if you say that the Torah, people say the Torah doesn't exist, that's a different sort of interpretation. The word kafir means disbeliever. It means somebody who knows the truth and covers it because of haughtiness, pride, arrogance, personal benefit, a whole bunch of things. There is a big difference between unbeliever and disbeliever. There's no classification for unbeliever in the Quran. What is Islam? Well, some people will tell you Islam means peace because it comes from salam, which means peace. We say salam, like shalom, we say salam. And some people will say Islam means to submit to one deity. Both are partially correct. The traditional classical linguistic, the same. Many people will interpret Islam as an oral tradition, by the way. It's not a tradition that historically for 1400 years has been taught in universities, apart from Al-Azhar and other places, but then there was a reason, jurisprudence has been taught there, not Islam. And I'll come on to what jurisprudence is in a minute, versus Islam. But traditional classical Islam translates and interprets Islam as meaning to surrender to one deity and attain inner and outer peace. That's what the word Islam means. What does the word Muslim mean? Muslimin is the Arabic, or Muslim for short. A person, someone who has surrendered to one deity and attained inner and outer peace. That's what the terminology means. And I'm going to come on to what Islamism is in a minute. So if you read the word kafir as unbeliever, you're actually preaching ISIS's work. That's what ISIS believes. That's what Al-Qaeda believes. That's what the Ikhwan al-Muslimin believes. That's what the Jamaat al-Islami means. That's what some Muslims now mean, but they've also been infiltrated by these contemporary views. So if you believe, when the Quran refers to kafir as unbeliever and not disbeliever, and only God can call somebody a disbeliever, you may as well go and fight 2 billion Muslims now. Because 2 billion Muslims don't believe that. And that's why it's very important. In the same way that if you pick up Shakespeare, Shakespeare wasn't even 1400 years ago. You pick up Shakespeare and you'll get books and books about a sonnet with about so many people disagreeing about the interpretation. Islam is an oral tradition. George Lucas gave an interview once that he got the idea of how to frame the Jedi master and student relationship from the Muslims in Morocco. That's how Islam for 1400 years has been taught, apart from when it's got hijacked by Mufti Hussein Amini, who David talks about, and others. So if you're reading translations of what people talk about, tafsir, the Arabic. Sorry, interpretations, tafsir. I could find you in one verse of the Quran many tens, if not hundreds, of different interpretations about words. And each interpretation is a man, never a woman, a man's interpretation of what that man thinks God is trying to say. That's why it's an oral tradition, past traditional classical Islam, through the teacher to the student. And then what happens? When the teacher, the sheikh, not a milkshake, as people, there's so many sheikhs now, and I call them milkshakes, but a true sheikh who has knowledge of science, maqasid, the spirit of the law, maslaha, tasawwuf, all of these things, when you become a sheikh. If you then find that a student is of a certain aptitude, and wisdom is very, very important, by the way. It's very important. You don't give an ijazah, permission to teach or to guide or even talk about certain things until wisdom is a part of it, unless you're able to take that knowledge and actually turn that into, use wisdom to get that out to people. I have ijazahs in many, many things within Islam from Sheikh Hisham Kabani, who Yudit can testify, I'm sure, that he's one of the world's most eminent teachers on traditional classical Islam in the world. So it's very important, and I think it's very important that, rightly so, for the last week, you would have heard, I'm sure, that it's very important that Jews classify and identify themselves rather than other people, using the protocol of the elders, using all the tropes, identify and try and classify people who are Jewish. It's also very important that people who are Muslim, who follow traditional classical Islam, are at the forefront of combating this civil war that is going on in Islam. There's a civil war going on. The first casualties of civil war, in terms of fatal casualties, are Muslims. But the civil war that's going on is a traditional classical Islam versus, and it's not just Islamism. There's other things, there's Wahhabism, and there's many other isms as well. But Islamism is the biggest threat. So I think that's very important, and I wasn't actually going to talk about, but I think it's very important. I'm going to talk, the Quran says there is no compulsion in religion. It's very, very clear. The Quran says God guides, the same God as of Abraham, guides who, and they used he in the traditional classical Islam does not denote a gender to God, but men translate and interpret, so they use he, right? God guides who he wishes to. And the other thing that I think is very important in the Quran, it also says, it doesn't say that only people who follow Islam as is understood now, not by the definition that I said, only they will go to heaven. The Quran says very, very clearly, every human being shall get the reward for an atom's worth of good that they do. Every human being. So if you hear translations, interpretations in English or read them that don't have that spirit, that maqasid, the spirit of what's been in the interpretation, then you're actually reading and interpreting ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, the same people that I'm fighting as a person who's a student of traditional classical Islam, ijazas in a whole bunch of different things, I'm also fighting. So we're allies. And by the way, you have to be allies, because we can't do this on our own, neither can you. So I'll move on now to the next bit. Okay. I hope that was useful.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what am I going to talk about now? I'm going to talk about my definition of extremism. Actually, let me go back a bit. Islamist radicalization, the triple threat that our liberal secular democracies are facing. We are very fortunate, the majorities, if not all of us, that we live in a liberal secular democracy where there is a separation between church and state, where I can be a Muslim how I want to be, or you can be whoever you want to be, as long as you're not breaking the law. And it's a one law for everybody. And it's not based on one particular faith. Okay? That's very important. Many Muslims aren't that lucky, and other people aren't so lucky as well. But I also want to talk about how the far right and the far left, I don't actually even like that terminology anymore. But I'm going to use it, and I'll say why I don't like it in a minute. In a minute. And Islamist theocracies are the biggest threat to all of us. And how anti-Semitism just brings them all together. It's the fuel. It's the opium of the masses. If we coined this phrase, Quilliam, there were three of us sitting there. We tried to always be ahead of what we started as an organization that was focused on Islamist terrorism, jihadism. And I'll give you some definitions on those words on one of the slides. But then we saw the world had changed. And about 6 or 7 years ago, we just sat in our boardroom, and what are we fighting? It's not just Islamist terrorism. We're really focused. We had to be focused on combating extremism and terrorism on the ground with ISIS. We were part of the global coalition. Charles mentioned Europol. There were other bits of work that we were doing as well. But really, we saw this emergence of the far left and far right, and how they all work with each other. I'll come on to that. So, what is my definition of extremism? Everybody can have their own, but I have a particular definition. What is Islamism? Regressive left. That's a better word than the far left. Regressive left was coined by one of my former colleagues, Majid Nawaz. He's attributed on Wikipedia, no less, as being the first person to use that. The far right, the CVE strategy I mentioned, why it's important that we all work together. Then I'm going to get into the pathways, why anti-Semitism is important to extremists. Sadly, after doing this work since 2004, it's not just Islamists anymore in terms of Muslims that are anti-Semitic. And a way forward. How can we work together as educators, as members? More importantly, yes, you're educators, most of you, but we're all members of civil society. And this has to be a civil society response. Okay, I will go through these slides a little bit because I didn't want to spend that long on sort of the earlier bit and sort of time my presentation. So most of you can read, but my definition of extremism is the desire to enforce illiberal views which are in a dichotomy to the liberal values that we all adhere to in a liberal secular democracies. And you can have non-violent or violent extremism. Somebody in the room actually mentioned the word extreme Islamism. I don't know, somebody mentioned it. Extremist Islamism in one of the questions. There's no such thing as extremist Islamism and non-extremist Islamism. You either are an Islamist or you're not. And there's no such thing as a practicing Muslim or a non-practicing Muslim in the contemporary sense, not the traditional classical sense. You're either Muslim or you're not. It's as simple as that. It's very easy to be a Muslim in the way following the Quran. All you have to say is the Shahada. That's it. Say the Shahada and you're a Muslim. You don't have to study. Nothing. Say the Shahada, all your sins forgiven, you're a Muslim. This is a definition that we were able to convince the UK government, other governments, etc., to use as a working definition. It's not the only definition, nor should it be. And extremism isn't always Islamist. It's far left, regressive left, far right. They have a symbiotic relationship, and I'll show that. And sometimes people waver between, because one of the things we did at Quilliam was we de-radicalized and rehabilitated the youngest case of a convicted terrorist in the US. His name is Mohammed Khalid. He was 17 years old. He was given to us to mentor after he was out on parole, and we worked with him, and we've done the same thing with far right. We haven't done it so much with far left, actually, and with Islamists. There is a relationship, and people sometimes move between them. So what is Islamism? It's not a made-up word, by the way. Some Muslims will say, Islamism, and I can send you something. I was an expert witness in Canada in the biggest libel case for an Islamist charity against some Muslims and non-Muslims recently, and smart move by the defense attorney who brought myself and a guy called Matt Levin. Matt Levin was the FBI investigator after 9/11 who followed the money and found out who actually funded the 9/11 terrorist attacks right at the last minute, and I wrote a rebuttal on this, so I actually already have it. What is Islamism, using their words, Islamophobia, a whole bunch of other things, and the case kind of got dismissed. But it's a smart move, great tactic. Islamism is a word in Arabic, Islamiyun. It was coined by the Muslim Brotherhood, the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, and they used it to differentiate themselves in the 1930s from other ordinary Muslims in Egypt at the time, who were the vast majority. They'd learnt it from a guy in India, and the guy in India who is the guy with the grey beard and glasses, Maududi. And in India, he set up the Jamaat Islami, which he said was a colonial struggle against the British Empire, but it was Islamism. And in Egypt, they took a lot of ideas from him, Sayyid Qutb, and it was set up by Hassan al-Banna as the first figurehead. He actually wasn't the brains behind it, but he was the charismatic leader. And there were other people, there were journals, Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani and Muhammad Abdu were the two intellectuals behind it, and this had a journal it started in 1898. Rashid Rida started it, and he merged it with a Salafi hardcore theology. Okay. So what is Islam? What is Islamism? I'll send you the paper, if I'm happy to send it, and just via Al-Shaday. In a nutshell, summary. Islam is a set of ideas, a set of values. People practice Islam around the world, nearly 2 billion people in so many different ways, and quite often excommunicating the other. It happens in all religions, all sects, right? Theological differences. Islamism is a political ideology, as coined by the Egyptians. I'm talking about Sunni Islamism primarily. Iranian Shia is a bit different. And it wants three things. The first thing it wants to do is to set up a utopian Islamist state and enforce a version of, you guys heard of the term Sharia law? Doesn't exist in Arabic. Fiqh, jurisprudence based on Sharia. Why does it not exist in Arabic? The Arabic word for law is qanun. Go and get an electronic Quran in Arabic or an electronic hadith in Arabic. Do a search for qanun, it doesn't exist. It does not exist anywhere. We use the term Sharia law here in the West, and we use Sharia as an adjective describing a noun, law. In Arabic and in the Quran and Islam as we understand it, Sharia is a noun. It's the path to the oasis, and it is a personal code for an individual and how they reach that path to oasis, i.e. the Quran and in the Middle East, fable storytelling is the way people, the Quran is written in stories. That's why I reject, and I can reject it, and I have done, the myth about how Jews were killed. Yes, Jews were killed in the Khyber massacre, as it's called. Yes, some Jews were killed, but they were killed, according to the Islamic sources, rightly or incorrectly, in a state of war, as those particular people, not all Jews, as traitors, because they changed sides. And that happens. But if all Jews were killed from that region, there wouldn't be any descendants. They weren't all killed. And again, I've written on this, can have that. But Islamism wants to set up a utopian Islamist state and enforce a version of law, fiqh, jurisprudence, based on Sharia from their interpretation. It's never been done in 1400 years until Saudi Arabia and Iran, and there were moments in Andalusia as a response to the French and European invasion that David talks about, the purification. It was more actually a response to build a theological jihad, if you like, against the, in inverted commas, invaders. It was never done at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. You go to Israel, you go to Jerusalem, you will find, as you find in the United Kingdom and in the US, Beth Din's, the family, if I'm pronouncing it right, Beth Din's, Beth Din. You go to Jerusalem, you'll find the equivalent, they call them Sharia courts, loosely translated, different schools of jurisprudence. I've been there. And each one will disagree with the other on basic things like, for example, if I make an ablution to pray, I'll make a Hanafi, according to Hanafi, the school of thought. Okay? And I don't do Maliki, right? It's another school of thought, jurisprudence. If I then give my wife a peck on the cheek, my ablution doesn't break. I don't break it. But in Maliki, if you do, you've got to go and do ablution again. They differ a lot. And now, as our university has recognized over 400 legitimate versions of this jurisprudence, and there are many. Okay. So the first thing they want to do is to set up a utopian Islamist state vis-a-vis ISIS. That's what they did. And enforce a version of fiqh based on Sharia. The second thing they want to do, on their interpretation, the second thing they want to do is to spread the flag of God, because they believe they're in God's gang, across the world. This goes to my point. There's no such thing as extremist Islamism. All Islamist subsects, groups, including Linda Sarsour and others, they believe in this. Hitler used democracy to get elected, and it was one man, one vote, one time. Hamas used democracy in Gaza, one man, one vote, one time. They will use whatever means. There was a raid on a cell, an Al-Qaeda cell, in Switzerland, a leading Muslim Brotherhood figure, and a document was uncovered, and it was just after 9/11. And they actually told us what they're going to do. The document is called a project. It's in Arabic. And I think we're doing, ISGAP, we're doing something on that. We're doing like maybe a report card on, this is what you told us what you're going to do, how have you performed against that? How have you, A for effort, B for attainment, that kind of thing. Because that's what they're doing in the United States, United Kingdom, around the world right now. Every single person who believes in Islamism believes in the first two things I've mentioned. If you're living in the United States, the UK, or other countries, are you just going to let ISIS or these groups wander in and say, hey, you guys declared the Islamic State, come and take our land. No, there's going to be a war. When to fight is a war of tactics, and that's why Al-Qaeda disagreed with ISIS when ISIS set up the Islamic State. Al-Qaeda said, we're not ready for it yet. We have to fight the far enemy, United States, other Western countries. ISIS said, nah, sod that, we're going for the near enemy, Muslim governments. So, first, set up a utopian Islamist state, spread it around the world, and the third thing they want, and this is from Mufti Umayn Husseini, other people as well, because it is Israel is the opium. I actually didn't come up with the term. Mona Al-Tahawi came up with the term. Israel is the opium of the masses for Muslims, also for the far left and the far right. That's the third thing. Wipe Israel off the map. If you're an Islamist or you believe in Islamism, these three things are core to your belief. Whether you show them, whether you wear them on your sleeve or not, this is not traditional classical Islam. Okay, let's move on. And what is jihad? Okay. We talked about Islam and we talked about Islamism. Jihad means to struggle. There was a hadith in traditional classical Islam that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, after a particular battle, some of the people were saying, where should we go and fight now? Where should we go and make jihad? And he said, go back to your own places where you live and do jihad al-akbar, the greatest jihad. What's that? What's that? Fight against yourself, your inner self, to do good rather than evil. And by the way, combative jihad is the lowest classification of fighting, of jihad, out of the 13 classifications. But jihadism is real. And jihadism, or a jihadist, is somebody who wants to use or supports the use of violence for Islamism. Very, very clear. Their definition is not mine. So when we say jihadist or jihadism, we are right. But we have to understand that when the Quran talks about it, it doesn't talk about it this way. When the Hadith talks about it, it's a contemporary, these guys, and others before them as well, these guys popularized it. But it's there, and we have to do something about it. Okay, I mentioned Sharia, mentioned now the adjective jurisprudence, mentioned it hadn't been done before. There's a theology. We call it Salafi, but actually that's changed in Saudi Arabia now as well. I can't know, even this is from last year, I can't now say that, I used to be able to say that every single person who's a Salafi is an extremist. I can't say it anymore, because they're having their own reform battles in Saudi Arabia. Wahhabism, there's different other things. But even amongst Salafism, when they combine this Islamist political ideology with these certain versions of Salafism, you get Salafi jihadism, Salafi jihad. That's why Osama bin Laden wrote his edict, the global Salafi jihad. He's not stupid. And I used to do training, by the way, for civil servants. And I used to have a flip chart, and I used to have the right-hand side covered up. On the left-hand side, I'd have things like better, what's the word? I only remember this a week ago. More equitable societies, a cleaner environment, save the earth, all of these things. And I say civil servants, here's a marker. Go and mark all the things that are important to you. I'll start. I marked them all. They're all important to me. And everybody marks everything. I then took the cover off the right-hand side. Osama bin Laden's global Salafi jihad. All the things on the left were there. Not daft. They know how to recruit. The other thing I will say, and obviously Shia is different. The other thing I will say, Islamism is a plausible reading of Islam. It is. When people say that jihadism or Islamism has got nothing to do with Islam, or they say it's all of Islam, they're both wrong. The reality is that jihadism and Islamism has got something to do with Islam. It's a plausible reading. That's why I say there's this civil war going on. But now that it's affecting wider societies, it's something that's affecting us all. Regressive left. Somebody coined the phrase head in the sand liberals. Okay, not my term, that's why I put it in inverted commas. These people, many people on the left, or the far left, regressive left, are actually I'd like to believe that many of them are trying to be progressive and trying to do the right thing. but they're getting caught up in this red-green alliance between Islamists who wrote this project, document and strategy on how to infiltrate the far left. And they're doing it. It's a credible document. And one of the things they used was the term Islamophobia. Hands up if you guys have heard of the term Islamophobia. Keep your hand up if you like the term Islamophobia. Okay. Let me tell you why that term is. Again, I have a paper on this. Happy to send it round. There is no official definition of the term Islamophobia around the world anywhere, nor should there be. There have been many attempts, legal definitions or other definitions. Let me tell you why it's defunct. Islam, as I mentioned, is a set of ideas, a set of values. I choose to be Muslim. Mentioned there's no such thing as a Muslim race. I could, if I wanted to, I could leave Islam tomorrow, then come back in again, just say the Shahada. It really is that simple.
Would you be a Muslim if you left?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't. I'd be Pakistani or British. I'm an ex-Muslim.
It's not ethnic.
Sorry?
It's not ethnic.
Nope.
Can you explain what is Shahada to the rest? Because
Okay, so Shahada is it's a testimony, a witness that you say there is no God but God, and Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his final messenger. That's it. And you don't even need a witness. Actually, you don't even need a witness. And if you can't speak, if you're not able to speak, you do that. That's why ISIS do that. They've hijacked it.
So could you repeat that again?
The Shahada. Yeah, it's a testimony, it's a witnessing of the following. There is no God but God. The Arabic word for God is Allah. And there are Christians in the Middle East who use the word Allah. And by the way, in the Muslims, did you know the word Israel is mentioned 43 times in the Quran? Did you know that? You can't get rid of the word Israel because then you have to reject the Quran. It's not feasible. You can't do it. Otherwise, throw the Quran away. However, one thing that the Quran does say, it talks about that, the Quran says that Jews were dispersed. I can't remember the reason why. Jews were dispersed, but God had promised the children of Bani Israel, the children of Israel, the land of Israel. God does not break his word, and therefore before the end times, they will be brought back and they will be given the land of Israel. That's in the Quran. The Quran is Zionist. It's in the Quran. God, Allah, the Arabic word, God is a Zionist. It's sometimes, but there are other things in play as to why people go the other way. So, Allah, we are also taught to believe the words, the names of God in the Torah, in the Bible, the Anjil, we call it in Arabic Anjil, and Zabur, the Psalms of David, and any other books before. But we say that Muhammad, peace upon him, is the last messenger. That's what our version of Islam believe. There's no such thing as a Muslim Ummah, by the way. Muslim Ummah, you may have heard this. Muslim community, you heard the Muslim Ummah? No such thing. No such thing. It's Ummah of Mu'min. What happened, there was a hadith that Hamas and all these people say that, their translation, and I'm paraphrasing, is that the Muslim Ummah is like one body. When one part of the body feels pain, the rest of the body feels pain. That's what they use for Israel, Palestine, the whole conflict there. Our brothers and sisters in Palestine are suffering. You as a Muslim based on that hadith. That's not what it says in Arabic, by the way. It doesn't say that. It says mu'min, believer. And as far as traditional classical Islam says, nobody can call somebody a disbeliever, only God. And every single person is either a believer. I can marry somebody who's Jewish, by the way. They don't have to convert. If God really believed, if Muslims in the Quran believed that a Jewish person was an unbeliever and you have to kill them and convert them, blah, 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 why would God let me marry a Muslim woman? Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, married a Muslim woman. Don't know if you knew that. Sorry, Jewish woman. I'm sorry, I can marry a Jewish woman. Sorry, that's what I meant. These things have been hijacked, some of these things. And again, if you're reading that tafsir, that interpretation, you're doing ISIS's work, you're doing Al-Qaeda's work. So, but these people are bad, the ones who are doing it. Okay. So, that's the Shahada. So, Far left, Islamophobia, Islam is a set of ideas, a set of values. I choose to be a Muslim. In a liberal secular democracy, I explain why that's so great, no set of ideas and no set of values should be beyond critique or satire. You guys, some of you may be old enough to remember Monty Python, Life of Brian. No set of ideas or values should be beyond critique or satire. However, no individual should be beneath dignity. That's why we persuaded the UK government and some other governments as well, not the US or Canada. Canada's the worst, actually. We did for this. We were able to persuade the current government, the one before that, and Tony Blair and Gordon Brown was wavering, to use the term anti-Muslim hatred. Because then it's against an individual or a group of people. And there are laws already covering that. But the Islamists and others, they use the term Islam, and far left will use the term Islamophobia. You're saying something, stifle debate, criticism, whatever, Islamophobic. By the way, I'm an Islamophobe, according to some people. Go online, you'll see articles about me, I'm an Islamophobe. I was no platform by Warwick University, where I was going to, we did an event where we were paying for it, LGBT Society in Warwick University, which is one of the Russell Group universities in the UK, one of the usually always in the top 10. And we were there, and I was going to go there, our event, talk about how the Ottomans in the 1850s in the Tanzimat reforms were the first state in the world to decriminalize homosexuality. And they used Islam to do it, by the way. Now, they still thought it was a sin. I'm not saying that was, but it was a step forward. And we're talking about then moving it on further, how we should use that as a platform, as a civil society living in the move that forward, and what should we do? That's what I was going to talk. That was the basis. I was no platform by the Warwick University LGBT Society for being Islamophobic. And great, because it filled the room. Standing room only. So my talk was, yeah, good start, okay, but we need to do more. And this is the Islamic reason why we could do it. Anyway, so also the left suffers from what we call the bigotry of low expectations. The savages don't know any better. They will measure other people. If somebody is being homophobic, for example, general member of society, they'll jump down their throat. But if it's somebody who happens to be a Muslim, well, you can't do that. It's in their faith. It's Islamophobic for you to say. No, be consistent in your condemnation. We Muslims are. So why should you? We don't need other people to define our faith for us. And they believe that the only proper Muslims are the Islamists, because that's all they have in English to read translations, interpretations, and secondly, the entryism that I talked about before. Then you got the far right, and we know about the far right. We know that they say all of Islam and all Muslims practice, certain form of Islam. Well, go fight all the Muslims. Then go to war, because you're not going to convert them. By the way, we had this thing here last year where somebody actually tried to say that, and I was sitting at the back with El Shaddai, and my watch was going at 100 beats a minute, and I was sitting there, calm down. And I just basically turned around to him at the end of the presentation, and I said, do you believe? My first question was, do you read Arabic? And he said, no. Oh, okay, fine, fair enough. Now I understand why. He'd said that all Muslims believe you have to go and kill everybody, convert people or kill them. And he'd given certain references, right? And he'd misquoted and misinterpreted one of the greatest goofy Sufi scholars in the world, who basically actually said, make jihad on yourself, not on other people. Fight your inner self. And he'd read something and said, anyway, so I said, do you believe that I as a Muslim have to do that? He said, yeah. So I just turned around to him and said, right, 5:30 when we finish, I'll see you in the car park, pick your weapons. We have to be careful about what we're doing. And again, they believe all of Islam, they claim they're anti-Islam and not anti-Muslim, but they are anti-Muslim. When you have people beating you up because you're Muslim, they're anti-Muslim. And they claim to be friendly to the Jewish diaspora. They claim to be friendly to the Jewish diaspora. Here's an example of how all three have worked together. If you look at the tweet is from a guy called Nick Griffin. Nick Griffin was the head of the British National Party, which is an official fascist party in the UK. It's defunct because I think they went bankrupt. Then we've got the guy in the middle, Jeremy Corbyn, who is far left. He institutionally moved the Labour Party to the far left. And then on the right, top right, you've got Dawood Abdullah, who at the time was the head of the official Muslim Brotherhood Front in the UK. I'm choosing my words very carefully because that's what they call themselves. And Nick says, go Jezza. That's Jeremy Corbyn. I wonder how many Labour activists the hysterical Zionist media campaign against Corbyn is repiling. And he supported Jeremy Corbyn, far left, Dawood Abdullah, Islamist, and of course he's far right. The thing that brings them together is anti-Semitism. That's one thing they can unite on. I also know that Nick Griffin went to Gaddafi for funding. And I couldn't join the British National Party if I wanted to. I'm the wrong colour and the wrong faith. Not that I want to. But he went to Gaddafi and nearly got funding from him. Because anti-Semitism. So this is just one example of that. So why is it important that we all get together and work together? This slide's going to build. So if you want to take a photograph, take it at the end. This was the CVE strategy, the PVE strategy. If we take the attitudes of, in this case, Muslims, this is the whole document in one slide. This is what we call the elevator pitch, the bar stool test.
Oh, what does CVE stand for?
Combating violent extremism, terrorism, Islamist terrorism and far right. The US call it CVE, so I changed it. In the UK, we used to call it PVE, but now we just call it prevent. And it's changed many times. And the red curve really signifies the views of Muslims. It can be the far right, it can be the far left, but I'm choosing to do Muslims for this presentation because I'm a Muslim. I'm not Islamophobe. People, if I talked about the far left, people might call me anyway. But it applies to all three and other things, isms. At any given time, X% of Muslims, in this case, supported Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab. What does that mean? Fundraising, joining them, recruiting, etc. directly provide material support is the legal term. And that number varies. I mentioned in my study that in the report, in the research that we did, at that time it was 4.9%. Then there's Y%, which is bigger, that sympathize. What does that mean? They don't support Al-Qaeda. They don't support Boko Haram. They're not jihadist terrorists. They are the Islamists. They have the same objectives, but they're not yet mobilized to violence. That's a bigger percentage. What does empathy mean? Empathize, and that's Z%, or Z for the Americans. People who empathize, again a bigger number. These are people who don't support, don't have the same objectives, but they will say we kind of understand why they're doing it. An example, Charlie Hebdo attack in France. The Guardian interviewed people of this model, and they found that 34% of Muslims empathized with the attackers. Oh, we don't believe in what they did. We don't have the objectives that they did. But you know what? We understand why they chose them as a target, because they were depicting prophets, cartoons of the prophet, etc., etc. Okay. I'm going to share with you something that I can share with you now because my former line manager, Gilda Kakov, said it in an open forum sitting next to me in Prague. He said it. If he hadn't said it, I couldn't have told you this. The shortest time observed by Europol, by agencies in the United Kingdom and other places as well, but I'm going to use his words, of somebody who was classified as being empathetic, not believing and not supporting, going all the way to being activated and about to carry out a jihadist terrorist attack was 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I have other numbers. It's not common, by the way, but this is how fast it can be. The shortest time from somebody saying, I don't support them, I don't have the same objectives, I kind of understand why. On a number of cases, shortest time has been 2 weeks. They were arrested before the attack was actually, before they were able to carry out the attack. One of them, a number of them actually, tried in a court, open court, sentenced to a few of them sentenced to 25 years. That was the potential. The That was how bad the potential attack could have been. I can't say anymore, but he said it, so I'm going to say it. Head of counterterrorism at Europol. For guys who don't know what Europol are, it's the European equivalent to the FBI. Okay. If we just focus on the sharp end and say it's not our problem, then it can be very fast. In these three areas, you guys, most of the people here, can't and nor should you provide interventions when somebody's providing support. You're not skilled and you're not trained for it. You potentially could have intellectual conversations with people if they are showing support. You know, we have the same, we have the same objectives. You can actually absolutely must get involved when people are being empathetic, and the whole purpose is building resilience. The only way, look at that 2 weeks, is to move that graph to the left as a civil society. The ideas are coming from the academy. We have some data which we can't share yet that Charles and I are involved in, proven by using all sorts of weird and wonderful artificial intelligence and machine learning, a whole bunch of things, that in the United States, Charles, can I mention this? Yeah.
Am I reading you up?
Going into the region from the universities. Sure. Okay. We have evidence, and it's something that's going to be published. Anti-Semitism, we used to think, we tested a hypothesis. We thought that where there's a lot of anti-Semitism in certain universities, maybe it's just because of the region. Maybe there's anti-Semitism in the region and it's seeping into the academy. We now have proof that it's the other way around.
Wait, can you repeat that again?
We thought, amongst other things, that where there are universities where there is a lot of anti-Semitism, that perhaps there is anti-Semitism in the region, the counties, the states where they are, and maybe it's seeping over into the academy.
No, it's the other way around.
Right, but we've now proven it. That's why it's so important.
Wait, which regions in the United States?
Most of the Ivy League universities.
So Ivy Leagues.
No, it's across the board. So university,
yeah.
we can now say scientifically
Yeah.
that universities are the major source of anti-Semitism in the United States
Yeah.
of America. It goes
It's
from
gonna
the
be-
university into
It's
society.
going to be published.
Very little from society
Yeah.
into the university.
Yeah. Anyway, that's for another time.
So we are at the front line,
Right.
whether we like it or not.
That's why it's so important that the academy gets involved in helping to shift this graph to the left. I'll move on. Building resilient communities. Pathways. How does somebody get radicalized? Whenever I used to do, I don't do it so much now. I remember going to the Maldives. The Maldives had the highest per capita numbers of people who joined ISIS in the world. Can you believe the Maldives had the highest number of jihadists that joined ISIS in the world? So of course the president
We should
there.
have a
And,
retreat there.
well, I went and my old company, we were commissioned to do some work helping them write their strategy. So yeah, I went. I didn't have to go, but I went. I could have sent my team. I went as part of the team. And one of the things I used to say in my training, and there's a whole bunch of people, and I used to say, how many people in the room? 30 people in the room. You know, give me a couple of days with you or a certain amount of time, and 30 people, I'll radicalize 5 of you by the end of the day. I used to say that to them. And they, no, you can't, no, you can't. But then I did.
In 5
Oh.
days?
No, in 2 days. Actually, in 1 day, one of them. To the point where they were sympathetic and one person was actually even ready to go and fight by using the following process. Once I did that, I then showed them how I did it and then took him back. I'm not saying he would have done it, but he was
Ready.
what's the word? He was actually using words to say that he was ready. That doesn't mean he would do it. But he was actually showing support in 1 day. Then I had to sort of bring him down and tell him, I lied, dude, I lied to you. I made stuff up. And this is how I did it. The pathways are very, this is macro level, and I won't go into it too much, but 3 parts to it. There's a middle part, which is the ideology, and that's the lens. And in there you have the intellectual, ideological, social, emotional, and spiritual. You have charismatic recruiters. You may have heard of the term lone wolf terrorism. There's no such thing. You don't go online. Nobody goes online to buy a pair of shoes and suddenly says, whoops, I'm becoming a jihadist. Doesn't happen. They have to be looking for something, or someone has to find them and persuade them. All social media and the internet is it's like the pen was. You know, 200 years ago. People used to write letters and the pigeons or whatever, or 100 years. Social media, faster way of getting information out, and good, bad, indifferent, whatever. It's a way, whether it's Telegram, whether it's whatever it is, right? Okay. 3 phases. In the middle, you have the lens. Charismatic recruiters, online and offline. We had a report called Jihad Trending where we actually proved that every single person that was convicted when it looks at the United Kingdom for jihadism, terrorism, had contact with a real person and was persuaded to do something, became operational. In the middle, you have the lens. Charismatic recruiters are very, very important. Osama bin Laden wasn't the brains behind Al-Qaeda. Oh wow, only 5 minutes. Okay, I'll go very quiet.
And there'll be Q&A for a bit.
Okay, I will be fine. Sorry, there's a bit at the beginning I just felt I should say. Lens in the middle, designed to have 7 groupthink behaviours. On the left-hand side, genuine grievances, partial grievances, perceived. We all have grievances. When we all go to our individual beds tonight and we go to sleep, before we go to sleep, we'll have a problem that we'll think about. And my problem to me is so much bigger than your problem is to me. And by the way, they all pale into insignificance when there are people in parts of third world countries where they haven't even got water and food. To really put it into context. But our problems are big. If you just fix problems, somebody will have a different problem tomorrow. But there are genuine grievances and problems. That could be racism. The leader of the 7/7 bombs, terrorist attack in London, who happens to be Sadiq Khan, not the mayor, a different Sadiq Khan, his grievance was he fell in love and his father wouldn't let him marry the girl that he wanted to marry. And a bunch of these charismatic recruiters, al-Muhajirun in that, recruited him, and I'll show you how they did it very briefly. Partial grievances are grievances that are based on a partial truth. Yes, I personally have disagreed with many of foreign policy decisions made by the United Kingdom Prime Ministers. I've even, in the past, demonstrated against some of our foreign policy things. I've not agreed. But then I took a more pragmatic approach. The Iraq War, used quite a lot. My question to these people has been, okay, if that was a genuine reason why people were radicalized to jihadist terrorism, why were, because of foreign policy, thousands of Muslims flying in from Western countries into Iraq and Syria to kill other Muslims? If you had a problem with the UK or American or European foreign policy, why would you go and kill Muslims? And if the problem was you were killing Muslims, no. It was a recruiting sergeant based on a partial truth. And then perceived grievances, not even just made up. It's made up, and we have time in the Q&A, I can give you an example of how one was made up and somebody was recruited. In the middle, you have 7 behaviors. The otherization, that everybody who is not part of this middle, this lens, everybody inside is one group, Islamists. And everybody outside of the group is excluded. Same with the far right, same with the far left, same with otherisms. They didn't invent this, by the way. They copied this. Then you've got the collectivization. Everybody outside is the same. The oppression narrative. Everybody outside is oppressing the people in the group, God's gang. Then you've got a collective guilt. Everybody outside of this gang, other Muslims, usually other Muslims, are complicit. Then you've got the supremacism narrative. That doesn't come in until stage 5. And by the way, even up until then, it's not illegal, and nor should it be in a liberal secular democracy. I spoke at a conference a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, about the Quran burning in Sweden and Torah. And it was actually a very good idea. It was Muslims and Jews coming together. I was the only first Muslim, after hearing so many people saying, let's ban these protests, who said, no, it's important that we don't ban them. I'm offended. One legitimate way of destroying a page in the Quran, according to all fiqh, is to burn it. You can bury it, you can put it in a river. But I was offended. So why am I offended? Because this guy was incitement to hatred, he wanted to make a point, clicks, etc. But I still defend the right for him to do that. Because it's the same rights that allow me to be a Muslim the way I want to be. I was the only person. But anyway, up until... I said a lie. There was another person later on, out of 25 people. Then we had this up to the supremacism narrative. Shouldn't be illegal, but we have a right as civil society to challenge those ideas, and we must. And then you get the violence. So ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram don't radicalize anybody. They take people who've been taken up to these 5 stages, the sympathy bit, and they pull people over the edge. And that's why I can radicalize somebody in 1 day or 2 days, because some of them you identify who's there already. And they take them over and they say self-defense is important and violence is the only way. That's why you get the 2 weeks. Because other people are radicalizing these people in the first place. 2 points, number 5. I won't go into the women's. ISIS was a different thing. Why is anti-Semitism important? Well, to mobilize civil society, they do 3 things. The first thing is to get Muslims to believe that the way their traditional classical Islam was practiced by their parents is wrong. Bidah, haram, shirk, kufar. 4 key words that they use. The second thing is to set up a whole bunch of organizations that actually work together with umbrella groups that actually freeze out the majority of Muslims and act as spokespeople for Islam to people who may be in government, maybe in the police, etc. There is an organization in the United Kingdom that actually claims, and there's one in the United States as well, that claim to be the umbrella groups for speaking for Muslim rights. And they claim to be, the one in the UK claims to be the largest. And they say they've got 300-400 people, members. Well, we analysed that. Overwhelming majority of those are people's houses or somebody who's got a chapter somewhere and another chapter somewhere. It's the same groups. It's about, when we did it, they were claiming 300 and there's about 60 or 70. That's all it was. Smoke and mirrors. But they set up a whole bunch of ideas, groups that actually represent different parts of civil society, the academy being one, politics being another, etc. And then the third thing they use, money. Setting up of NGOs. Now it's actually a little bit different. They set up companies which got bankrupt after 18 months before they had to submit their first filing, and then okay. But typically they've used NGOs to fund these activities, mobilization. Social media is important though. Here is an example of when the far right attack happened in New Zealand, where the far right, Islamist and regressive left came together and said it was a Mossad false flag operation. The guy who carried out the shooting was actually a member of Mossad, blah, 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 blah. And it got posted on Facebook. I've used this one because my son, my eldest son, replied to this group. And by the way, this group is not even Islamist. It's traditional classical Islam. It's a group that I belong to, my son belongs to. And he wrote on it, it's such... I don't want to... It's not right. It's a shame you have to post such a link to the whatever group it was. I see no correlation in the group for what it was set up for, i.e. spirituality, and conspiracy theory. Probably time I left the group. Peace out. That was my son. I was proud of him when he did that. And then they replied back, this group is against all kind of terrorism and extremism. If there are people in this group who have sympathy for Wahhabis, Salafis, ISIS, blah, 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 welcome to leave. Any way you look at it, it's all a Dajjalic Yahudi. Dajjalic is the Antichrist. Yahudi is the Arabic for Jew. It's an Antichrist, end of times Antichrist, a Jewish trick, isn't it? Everything is. We're living in these times, right? May Allah may God protect us, shelter us. Then my son reported it to Facebook. And Facebook gave my son the proverbial 2 fingers up very diplomatically, saying there's nothing wrong with this. We're not going to take it off. So, anyway. It's not just Islamists, by the way. Now, this anti-Semitism has seeped into mainstream traditional classical Islam. It's my fault, it's civil society's fault, it's government's fault. We did not inoculate the traditional classical, the followers of traditional classical Islam. And this is just a case study I did of somebody, and I presented this at the Global Forum. I won't go through the... By the way, yeah, I'm happy to share this, by the way. Way forward, let's work together. We must work together. We need to theologically deconstruct the anti-Semitic discourse, of course. There is a concept in Islam called Israeliyat. That concept is traditional... Take from the people of Israel, Jewish people, that which is good. Because a message was sent to them that was good. If it's good, take it. And the scholars took it. We fast... on Sunnis, we fast, Sunni fast on Ashura, Day of Ashura. We fast. It's not an obligatory fast. What is that fast for? Well, Muslims 1400 years ago saw Jews fasting, and the Prophet was asked, why are these Jews fasting? Well, they're fasting because of, I think it was God freeing, saving Moses and the Jewish tribes from Moses, if I'm correct. Fast, it's a great reason to fast. Moses is our brother, fast. We do it, and it's taken from Israelia. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, took it from Israelia. The concept of one ummah, we need to deconstruct that. It really is being hijacked. We need to deconstruct the hypocrisy of BDS together. By the way, there may be some people in here who have some sympathy for BDS. People have often tried to come boycotting Israel. People have come to me in the past and said, you've got to get behind boycotting Israel. We've got to do an apartheid state. And I've said to them, quite a few people, I will entertain this debate if you are willing to apply the same principle to Pakistan. What? What do you mean? How can Pakistan be an apartheid state? I said, okay, let's talk about this. I don't have dual nationality. I could have Pakistani nationality if I wanted to, but I don't take it. I haven't took it for a number of reasons. One of the reasons, I have to sign a piece of paper that says Ahmadiyya, who want self-identify as Muslims, are second-class citizens. I didn't want to do that. You can have a theological debate to say, theologians can debate as to why one group is... Muslims do it all the time, right? But I don't want to treat anybody as a second-class group, people as second-class citizens. So then apply that same level of argument to Pakistan. If you're willing to entertain that debate, I'm willing to have this discussion. Otherwise, don't bother. But there's many more. Just because somebody is not Islamist these days doesn't mean they're not anti-Semitic, sadly. The guys who... You may have heard the story about the guys in the convoy in London who were shouting rape Jewish girls. You may have seen this. They weren't Islamists. Sadly. Radicalization of the moderates who weren't inoculated. I'm on a task force at the government, UK government, looking at this at the moment and what we should do about it. Get away from interfaith. It doesn't work. It really does not work. I tried it in 2005, 6, 7. My experience is a group of people sitting around a table saying how wonderful we all are, what a bunch of things we have in common, and then going away saying we're the best. Cursing each other's views. Doesn't work. Get involved. This is me. We have this multiculturalism in the United Kingdom where we celebrate each other's differences. Why can't we follow omniculturalism? There are so many things that we have as human beings, people of different faiths, different ethnicities, that are the same. Focus on my thing, omniculturalism. That's my big bear, and make whatever. Sadly, make mainstream countering anti-Semitism sexy is my word. What I mean by that is make it easy for people to receive whatever it is you're doing. Talk to people in the language that they can understand. Final, just got one slide. We can't get away from narratives. We can't get away from stories. I mentioned the Quran is a bunch of stories. That's what it is. We human beings like to receive information in stories and narratives and fables and various things with some certain messages in. The time we're living in is, we are living more so in the age of narratives with social media, etc. There is, whoever controls the narrative, whoever controls the way that this story, the narratives are told, wins. They start to have an impact on the truth, in inverted commas. As academics, as people in civil society, we need to maybe think about how you guys might want to put your curriculums together and other people in combating anti-Semitism. The final thing is, a couple of things. I've just re-emphasised, anti-Semitism is the most dangerous form of racism on the planet. I really believe that, and so do other people. It isn't surprising to me that hating Jews is something that those on the far left advocate, those on the far right advocate, and Islamist theocrats advocate. It's the form of racism that brings the triple threat to democracies together. And finally, very rare for me to say something clever, but I did on this interview, so I use it. This is not what we're having right now. It's not an ideological struggle between Muslims and non-Muslims. I'm talking about from an Islamist perspective. This is a struggle between good and evil. I really believe that. So when people tell you you're Islamophobic and you're actually on the side of the angels, remember that. You know, the dark side of the force only goes after you when you're having an impact. So it's a battle, it's a struggle between good and evil, and it's not dependent on what faith or non you practice. This is so important. And I'm going to end there, so I'll take questions.
Yeah, so we don't have much time.
Oh, sorry.
But it's okay. But Haras, thank you very much. Thanks for all the work you do with ISGAP and well beyond. I have a question. I want to be, well, respond. I'll be brief and please respond briefly.
Okay, I'll be brief.
You mentioned it. Muslims are the greatest victim to this. They are, you know, it's a civil war, and there's spaces where there's horrific violence, often against innocent people. There's a lot of people in the Jewish community, and there's a lot of Jewish scholars, and then people who are, I think, of goodwill, who are sensitive, and it's, I think, and some people have articulated it here. If you guys could please listen. They are hesitant to be critical of, say, anti-Semitism coming out of the African American community and anti-Semitism coming out of Muslim communities because they don't want to be accused of being racist or Islamophobic or having white privilege. So given the fact that this is, you know, anti-Semitism is the fuel, innocent people, mainly Muslim people, are dying, and societies are in turmoil and sometimes losing out and losing their freedoms. How do we navigate this very tricky and sensitive area and challenge?
Okay, first of all, it's very important that we do. Otherwise, we also are practicing the bigotry of low expectations. We're being xenophobic and racist ourselves. And the reason we do, and the way we do it, and I want to touch on something about Linda Sarsour earlier as well. Any response that we have to be consistent in our values. It's important that we do it, and our values, if our values are right, and our values are based on respect, dignity, human rights, rule of law, all of the other values that we as in our different countries and human beings we have, if we know that we are on within the parameters of the values, then that is how we take them on. If we're being accused, and we will, I'm a neocon, I'm an Islamophobe, I'm a Ziacon. It's a camera. I will. You know how my life.
This is why we get along.
No, but also, but also, you know, assassination attempts, fatwas against me, a whole bunch of things, right? It's okay, you're safe. But be consistent in your values. If we are consistent in our values, and we don't care who the other person is, their color, their race, their ethnicity, their religion, if our values are right, then we're on the right side. It's very important. The other thing, somebody mentioned earlier on about Linda Sarsour and some people saying we must engage with them because we must have these backdoor channels. All you're doing if you do that is you're empowering them and giving them more of a stakeholding, giving them more entryism, and they'll never be on the side of a liberal secular democracy. And it's happened, we had to remove groups from the table here in the United Kingdom and other places as well. It gives them power, it gives them a level of entryism when they can turn around and say, we're not anti-Semitic, here are our Jewish friends. We're not this because here are our Christian friends. We're not this because here are our African American friends. We're not this. But if they didn't have any Jewish friends, then they couldn't say that. And people are not taking them, by working with them, okay, back channel discussions, that should happen. But nothing publicly, nothing supporting them, no sharing a platform unless it's to debate them. Otherwise, you're empowering them.
Thank you. David?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I'm the founder of a group called Jewish Institute for Liberal Values, and it's based really on the model that you just articulated. And we're building a new coalition, center-left to center-right, of Asian Americans, Black Americans, Jewish Americans, Muslim Americans, and others, and really on the model of the omni-American, omni-cultural ideal that you just articulated.
By the way, I didn't come up with it. Professor, I learnt it from Professor Mugaddam in the US.
Actually, the person who first articulated it was in his book called The Omni-American. It was an African-American writer, and I'm just blanking on his name. And I think it really is the basis. And I'm surprised to hear it in the UK as well. And I'm wondering if you see the opportunity for sort of a more global version of that, where we could bring together all these communities who don't spend time on their own, just articulating their own identities, but rather on what they have in common and a common narrative.
I don't only think that it's possible, I think it's a great idea, and I think it has to be done because the borders, we live in digital ages, and many people, their real lives are online, sadly. That's why I don't post on social media. I haven't done for the last 2 years. I used to be quite active. It's very important that it's done. What we're actually dealing with are global insurgencies. You cannot tackle global insurgencies with law and war. You can't do it. Unless it gets violent, then yeah, obviously. And this is a battle of ideas. And there are no borders anymore. It must be done. And it's a great, and if there's anything I can do to help, by all means, let me know.
Could I ask you, you said about the Ahmadiyya. Okay, I have partnered with them on some things in Latin America. Could you explain who are they?
Right, yeah. So the Ahmadiyyas are a group of people who self-identify as Muslim. But they have certain views that the rest of Islam, Muslims, say it takes them out of the fold of Islam. And even amongst the Ahmadiyyas, there's more than one sect. One of the sects believes that a particular person called Mirza Ahmed was a prophet, another prophet. There's another sect that says he wasn't the prophet, but he was the Mahdi. And the Mahdi is the person who's preparing the way for the Messiah. And then there's another sect within the Ahmadiyyas who actually say that he was a friend of God, Wali, awliya Allah, Wali. The majority of Muslims around the world have excommunicated with them because they say that they don't believe in the finality of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So this is the difference. And look, if people can self-identify as a cat, which is true in the United Kingdom, why can't people self-identify as a religion? That's actually true. Something's happened in the United Kingdom.
John?
It's good.
Haras, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very moving. I come from Oxford, and the primary and secondary schools that I went to 15 minutes from here, like white kids were not the majority in either. We would every morning it would be the Lord's Prayer, and then Assalamu alaikum, salam. And I think your presentation does so skillfully at showing the love and the community and the spirituality within Islam. And I think that's so essential for this presentation and wider kind of course on anti-Semitism. We're talking about putting yourself in the mind of your enemy, but also understanding who is your enemy. And I think
they're also my enemy as well.
yeah, and exactly, you're personifying something that for people who are like Jewish diasporic or in the West like me as well, like you are bringing together everybody who would want to fight against the kind of evil forces, as you were saying. So I just thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
We did.
So, last night, I think it was last night, spoke about this at the end of my presentation, and two people asked me this question. You raised the issue of not having interfaith dialogue, but reaching out interculturally, and someone else asked, what would a coalition like that look like? In other words, a Jewish coalition together with Muslims of different cultures, but not based on an interfaith dialogue model, but based on a cultural model.
Yeah.
Could you please describe that? Because I think
Sure.
we need you to explain what that would look like.
Okay. Most countries and most places have reached out to Muslims through their faith. And what they've done is they've had, if the Jewish have rabbis talking to imams. By the way, hands up if you actually know what an imam is. You're probably all wrong, by the way. And I'll tell you why. An imam is somebody who probably has the least amount of Islamic knowledge in a mosque. Probably the person who has one of the least, and in the team, one of the least amounts of Islamic knowledge in the mosque. Let me say what the word imam is. Imam is not a priest or a rabbi. Right. An imam is a person who leads the prayers 5 times a day. And usually the person who's paid the least because he's an immigrant from another country who's flown in and paid peanuts to live in the room, and because the real people with the knowledge can't be bothered to come out at 4 in the morning to do the Fajr Salah. So it's usually somebody who's done a dars in Nizami in India or Pakistan or wherever and has a basic understanding. Of course he does. But out of the hierarchy of the people in the mosque who are the knowledgeable people, probably the least knowledgeable. That's what I meant. So, and they'll reach out to the imam, who doesn't have any authority in the mosque, by the way, because he's not on the committee. He's not on the board. He's just leading the prayer 5 times a day, right? So, but anyway, and it's this misconception. It's different in Shia. In Shia, an imam means something else. That's what I mean. It's one of the 12 spiritual heads that were promised by the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, and the Quran also, that there will be, before the end days, there will be 12 global spiritual imams. So spirituality as opposed to prayers and stuff like that. And there will be 12, it's not actually Sunnis and Shias believe that as well, but then there's differences. Some Shia Ismailis believe there are 11ers, 12ers. It's complicated. But the Shia is different. But going back to your point, very quickly. So don't engage with the imam. Why? And don't send the rabbi out to engage with them. Go and engage with the people who want to send their kids to school, to good schools. Go and engage with the people who have a realization at home, or the answer to when having their dinner, the answer to my children getting a good education is not Israel-Palestine. And there are so many out there. Go and engage with people who don't want to necessarily bring their religion to the table. That's the way to engage. And there are organizations that have started this work, and some and actually it's been started and it's failed a few times as well, in the US and here. Sadly, because people keep going back to the religious model. Intercultural. Let me give you an example of one thing that we did in Manchester. Jews want to bury people when they've died within 24 hours as soon as possible. Same thing in Muslims. So a bunch of Muslims and a bunch of Jews who weren't religious got together and bought this scanner that they share. So that if there needs to be a post-mortem, rather than cutting the person up, you just get the person in quickly, and it qualifies for a post-mortem type investigation, and then you can bury them straight away. Otherwise, people have to sit on slabs for days until the coroner is ready to do the post-mortem. Many other ways. Look for things that we share in common. Short answer.
Okay, you know what? We have a few, we'll extend it a bit. So Bilal and then Miriam, quick points, and then we'll collect the 2 points, and then Haras will have the final word.
Yeah, first thing, I wanted to thank you, Charles, for putting together all this, of course with the help of others, and especially to Haras. Because if I summarize your intervention yesterday, I will say, oh boy. Because to be honest, my dad was in state security in Morocco, so I grew up in a big city, and I was experiencing great repulsion when I was seeing this very religious people. And then, anyways, I grew up in a very open-minded house. And
was it a house of tasawwuf?
No.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up like as a spiritual person, even if I was Muslim born. And the way I actually described everything, even the terminology, in Morocco, I guess that's majority of population is Amazigh, so it's very hard actually to grasp what you explained there. But I think that finally I understood many things, and I guess that that's changed something in my head actually to see things from both sides. And thank you.
Thanks. Marilyn, final point or question?
There was a reference in your talk to Andalusia, and I missed the reference, but I'm wondering if you think that this idea that you're proposing at the end, intercultural versus interfaith, is a way to think about, another way to think about convivencia, the way to think about Jews, Muslims, and Christians coming together in a more
Absolutely.
harmonious fashion.
Absolutely. That was one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most successful, until this response to shoring up the defences against the invaders, as they called it, or this purification, as David called it. Until then, it was one of the, I think, one of the most spiritual and successful. And to me, spirituality is not necessarily just religious; it's everything. I think that was one of the most fruitful times, places that have been in effect for the last couple of thousand years. I really do. I think it's a great model. It's how do we get there is a different question.
On that note, Haras, thank you so much.
No, my problem.
All right. So we have a bunch of, wait, please stay for a while. We have a bunch of housekeeping announcements. Al-Shadei, do you want to, or should I? Should you?
Go ahead.
All right. So first of all, 6:45 at the Porter's Lodge to go to the Chabad House. There's breakfast, I understand, Saturday and Sunday.
Yes,
In
so
the college?
Saturday will be a cooked breakfast like usual, Sunday will be continental style.
And no lunch, no dinner.
Yeah, lunch and dinners over the weekend.
What's the time frames for both of them?
Good question, same time,